Some time ago, I was invited for a Shabbaton to a very large and respectable Jewish community in the United States. It was sessions a whole Friday and Shabbos and Sunday. For Shalosh Seudos, I was invited to a particular shul to speak. In fact, somebody just introduced himself a few minutes ago. He was there at that speech. And in middle of the speech, I spoke about V'nafshoy kshura b'nafshoy of Yaakov and Binyamin. And the fact that the way we are created, the relationship between parents and children, is what's called an ahava she'ena tluya b'davar, as it says in Pirkei Avos. A love that's not conditional. There's no ulterior motives. It's not a love that is based on ahava hatluya b'davar, conditional love. It's unconditional. In Svarim, it's called an ahava atzmis. An ahava atzmis means it's innate, it's intrinsic, it's essential. It's etzem to etzem, my core to your core. It's not based on your actions or lack of them, based on your gestures, based on your words, based on your behaviors. Those are important, but they actually can eclipse the real, genuine love. Because when a child behaves what we would call so perfectly and beautifully, when you get those nachas notes like you got in second grade, you remember the nachas notes on the report card? You want to go back to those days? It's amazing, and it's a great feeling, and we're very grateful for it. But it actually eclipses on the Kinar Yisrael V'Yaveu, on the Ava Atzmis, the essential love that's unconditional, that sometimes comes out precisely in a moment of failure and disappointment and setbacks. A deeper relationship comes out, a much deeper relationship. This is what I spoke about in that community, and I said, and therefore, be very, very careful when somebody advises you to sever your cords with your child because there's so much pain in the relationship. There's so much disappointment. Some people used to advise, throw him out of the house, throw her out of the house. And I'm not talking about figuring out with a child that they may want to move on and relocate and become independent and get a job somewhere. I'm talking about throwing you out of my house. You have no place in my house. We don't have a relationship. And I said, we sometimes make this mistake because the pain is so deep, and I think if you can only get out of my life, I will become tranquil again. I'll have simchas achayim. But I said, I want you to know, dear parents, anyone who's sitting here, that the pain of being disconnected from your child and your child being disconnected from you is far worse than any other pain they will cause you because of behaviors that are really difficult to watch. I finished the speech, and there was a Shalosh Seudos, they were singing Zmiris. A Jew came over to me, asked if he could speak to me in the corner. When there was no bima there, we went to the bima, and he's just sobbing. I said, what happened? Why are you crying? He says, Rabbi YY, where were you 35 years ago to give this speech? What were you doing 35 years ago? Why didn't you come here to give this speech? I said, truthfully, I was eating cotton candy. I still eat cotton candy sometimes, unfortunately, but I also give speeches. Then I was only eating cotton candy. That's why I'm so slim. I was trying to lighten up the mood. He laughed. He says, why didn't you give this speech? I said, I'm sorry, what happened? And he tells me these words, and I will never forget them. He says, my wife and I both became Bali Tshuva. We returned to Yiddishkeit like a whole generation of Jews, searching Jews who came back to Yiddishkeit. We moved to this community. And one of the deepest desires of Bali Tshuva is to fit in. And sometimes a lot of painful things happen. You'll forgive me, I'm sometimes a little too blunt. Bali Tshuva are sometimes exploited and manipulated, unwillingly, sometimes with good intentions. by FFBs who want to make them fit in. And they lose their individuality, they lose their creativity, they lose their judgment, and they don't think for themselves, because I just have to fit in so my kids get shidduchim in the mainstream community. It's a big loss for them, and it's a big loss for everybody else, because they have a lot to contribute. It's a separate sugya. But he says, this is what happened. We just so wanted to fit in. And we had a child, a few children. There was a 16-year-old who became a Baal Tshuva in the process with us, and he was in school, and it really wasn't working out. He was very defiant. He was, as they called it then, making a lot of trouble. He was just not towing the line. And we went to somebody to consult, somebody we respected very much. And I have to say this, that when I heard this, I understood that this person who we consulted probably meant well, because he thought about it from his own experience. I'm just saying this to you. But sometimes meaning well doesn't mean that I'm not clueless. Remember that, right? The road to hell is paved with a lot of people who mean well. Some of you have a lot of experience with that. People who mean well. This person, I'm sure, meant well. He says, what should I do? The man said, give your son an ultimatum and tell him, if you shape up by this date, good. If not, this is not your home anymore. He says, but he has a key. You'll change the locks. He says, but he's my son. He says, don't worry, he'll shape up. This is how you do. You warn a kid. Everybody wants to be by Tati and Mommy. Who doesn't want to be home, right? Where are you going to go find a new home? Where are you going to go find a new home? He'll come right running back with a little shtick, some teenage rebellion. Not a big deal. And he looks at me and he said, and I listened to him. My wife and I wanted to do the right thing. We listened to him. And we told our 16-year-old, listen, this behavior is unacceptable. This is a frum Torah home. This is the school you're going, the yeshiva you're going. It's all for your good, of course. You know when you say that, right? You know how that goes down. It's all for your good. You know, I don't need nachas. It's for your good. All for you. I don't have an ego. I was born without an ego. I'm as holy as they get. I'm digressing. You can already see what mood I'm in. It's been a long Shabbos. It's been a long Shabbos. So, I had the schus to sit yesterday for around 14 hours, almost without interruption, listening to narrative after narrative after narrative after narrative. So I'm going to do a little therapy for myself right here. Sorry. So my cynical, humorous remarks, just consider my therapy. They told the boy, either you shape up or this is not your home. He didn't shape up, and 3 weeks later, we changed the locks. He looks at me, and he says, Rabbi Jacobson, it's been 35 years that my wife and I have not seen my son. We haven't even had a telephone conversation with my son. A few years ago, I found out that he married out of the faith. He has a few children who are not Jewish. That's why I say, where were you 35 years ago to give this speech? What do I tell this man? It reminded me literally of that pasuk in Miketz, when the Shvatim were thrown into prison by the Prime Minister of Egypt, and they said to each other, Aval Hashemem anachnu, alachinu, asher re'inu tzaras nafshay b'yischanenu eleinu v'lo yishamanu. 20 years later, they're like, wow. Nafal ha'asimon, as our Israeli friends say. The dime fell. Epiphany. He's sobbing. Talk about charata. Talk about remorse. I never understood what charata Rabbi YY Jacobson talks about, but I saw it. The remorse, the brokenness. And then he looks at me, he says, nobody knows something else, that for 35 years I haven't slept one night. 35 years I haven't slept one night. Why couldn't you give this speech 35 years ago? I think this summarizes everything that this Shabbos was about. The pain may be very deep, disappointment profound. Agmas nefesh runs and penetrates. Sometimes you feel every bone of your body. You don't know what to do with yourself. But remember, the alternative to sever cords with somebody who is v'nafsha kshura b'nafsha, your daughter, your son, who is part of you, who is one with you, to sever those cords, the pain in that is infinitely more great, because this connection is not superimposed. The connection is essential to the fabric of creation. It's the deepest relationship that exists in the world. Or in Yehuda's words to his father Yaakov, Eich elel avi v'hanar einenu iti. How can I go back to my father and tell him, sorry, you lost a child. Sorry, he's a ganev. Sorry, he's a ganev. He became a slave. You say, but he's a ganev. Good questions. Eich elel avi v'hanar einenu iti. And the Shem Shmuel teaches that every Shabbos, the neshama goes up to the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's called Aliyas Ha'olamus. Everybody goes up. Am Medushne Yoinek. And he says, when you start welcoming Shabbos, the question is, Eich elel avi. How can I go up Shabbos to be with my father, to have dveikus in Hashem, va'anar einenu iti, when our children are not with us? But what do people do with the pain? People are reeling from so much disappointment. And let's face it, a lot of self-blame. Jews generally are known to be a guilty people. I say, what does it mean to be a Jew? It means you feel guilty. And when I sometimes, once in 20 years, I find a Jew who's not guilty, he blames himself. You show me one Jew who's not guilty, and I promise you he's blaming himself from not feeling guilty enough. Why am I not guilty? I'm not Jewish. It's fascinating, fascinating. Micha Amcha Yisrael. Guilt.com is owned by us. We say every single morning, 7 days a week, Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, weekdays, Avinu Avarachamon Hamerachim. Rachem na aleinu v'seim b'libeinu bina lahavin ulahaskil l'shmaya lilmoid ulalamed. For those of you who have been davening all your life, say it once in English so you understand it. You could say it in Yiddish, or you could try to tune into the words. Do you know there's no tefillah where we mention Rachamim so many times? Avinu, our Father, of Harachamon, who is compassionate. Okay, I got it. Hamirachem, you said of Harachamon. Right? They always taught us, don't be redundant. Rachem, okay, I got it. Rachem, Rachem na aleinu, 3 times. For what? V'seim b'libeinu bina lahavin ulahaskel. So we usually say, God, hab rachmanas, Tata, have rachmanas, and give me a little bina. Why, when we request bina and das, do we have to rely on rachmanas? And the Balatanya writes in Torah Parshas Vayetze, he says that's not the pshat. Pshat is something else. I quote him, Harachamim v'hadas tluyim zebazeh. There's no das if it's not preceded by compassion. It's not you're asking Hashem to have compassion and give me das. Avinu avaracham amarachim rachem no aleinu. Allow me to experience compassion, because only then can I experience awareness. Only with compassion comes perceptiveness, awareness, knowledge, clarity. You will never be able to become aware of yourself or your child without first having compassion. Knowledge without compassion almost never works. Harachamim v'hadas tluyim zebazeh. What I mean by this is, when I first don't have compassion, my perception will be tainted by anger, by frustration, by depression, by loneliness. I don't have that clarity. Only when I first have very deep compassion, compassion on yourselves, compassion on myself, compassion on everything that's coming up in your system, everything that's coming up in your brain, everything that's coming up in your heart, in your chest, in your torso, in your back, in your neck, in your body, everything that's coming up, just to have compassion. You know what compassion means? What does rachamim mean? Rachamim means to be able to be fully present to the emotion without judgment. It's not easy for us Ashkenazic cerebral geniuses. It's not easy for us because we grew up in yeshiva. When somebody says a svara, how do you show that you're a successful yeshiva bacher? Was hakst dat scheinig, du Ferd? If you're edel, was hakst dat scheinig, du beheme? Because that's kosher. And if you're really edel, a krumme cup, crooked head. This is inside jokes for the men's section. You guys do the same thing, but in nicer words. But we know you attack. So when you have an idea, what do? You attack. You know, you're a shaita, ibche mistaber, right? Ibche mistaber. I once heard from the Lubavitcher Rebbe of Fabrengen, he said, two Jews meet, so you say, Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom. Why don't you say the same thing? Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem. Imagine in English, I say, good morning. You say, morning good. Good afternoon, afternoon good. How are you? You are how? What's up? Up what's? So the Rebbe said, when zwei Yidden begegnen sich, when two Jews meet, and you say, Shalom Aleichem, the first response has to be, you got it all wrong. It's the other way around, right? Reb Shimon would say, trauma. The prefrontal is offline. Sorry. Shalom Aleichem. What does he want? What does he want? What's the next step? What's the next step? Aleichem Shalom. Out. Two Jews meet. You say one thing, I have to disagree. Right? Jackie Mason, his real name was Rabbi Yaakov Maza. He's the guy who would repeat many of my jokes. So he once said, in a very deep shmuas that he gave on Jewish identity, and he was a maven, he said that when two Jews meet, if within 3 minutes they don't establish a family connection, one of them is not Jewish. Right? It's always your Shviger's sister-in-law, Begilgul Rishon, was my Bubba's Shviger, whatever. So it's always that way, right? But there's also another point, I think. If two Jews meet and within a few minutes they're not disagreeing, one of them is not Jewish. So Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom. How did I get into Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom? Anybody was listening, or you're just laughing? You guys don't know. Anybody was listening? You take notes. They're taking notes. They're sitting like this. The men are sitting like this. Alle sitzen azoi. They want to know when lunch is. And the women are all notes. They're taking notes. Notes. Shine. Thank God there's a mechitza. Brilliant. Moshe Rabbeinu, brilliant. Most of the issues you don't see. It's the way it's supposed to be. Poor secular world. They didn't figure it out. Cook nicht. Sach besser. Anyway, what was I talking about? Anybody can take out their notes? Huh? Rachamim and Das. Huh? Very good. Very good, without notes. Nice. Good to Kepala. Okay, your daughter takes after you. Avinu of Rachamim. What does Rachamim? Rachamim means to show up to the reality without arguing, without judgment, without arguing with my emotion. It doesn't make sense. Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom. Without judgment, but without the need to run away from it. Because when we don't judge, it's too hard. I'm out. Lunchtime, that's why we have breakfast, lunch, dinner. And for Jews, we have Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, Musaf, Ne'ilah. I'm out. I'm gone. Rachamim is to be fully present. And you know what happens? The flower buds. The emotion actually opens up a little bit. And then there's Das. You can actually see what's happening. That's where all growth happens. So we say to Hashem, before Bina, before Lahavin, Lahaske, Lishmaya, Lilmoid, Lalamet. And really this whole Shabbos is really this request. V'seim b'libeinu Bina, Lahavin, Lahaske, Lishmaya, Lilmoid, Lalamet. So they can be Lishmai, Velasas, or Lakayim, as called Divri Salmoter Secha, Ba'ahava, V'hoire Neinu B'seira Secha. To open me, to make me perceptive, to make me aware. I can't become aware of my children if I don't have self-awareness. The prerequisite for all healing, for all growth, is self-awareness. Self-awareness is the hardest thing. Because self-awareness means to open myself up to all the truths that I may have buried for 49 years, or 59 years, or 39 years. I have buried them. If I wouldn't have buried them, then the self-awareness would have been easy, but these are uncomfortable truths. Never mind if there are wounds. Never mind, you'll forgive me if there's trauma. And you just heard what that looks like. Self-awareness, that's dangerous. What's going to come up for me? My whole life I was invested in protecting myself, in building Chaimas Yerushalayim to protect myself from the enemies, from the Romans, from the Babylonians, from the Egyptians, from the Greeks, who all live inside of me. But if I don't open the walls, Praza is Teshav Yerushalayim. Geula means that Yerushalayim is going to be open. There's going to be no walls. No walls. You won't have to judge me. I won't have to judge you, because I won't be living from a space of guilt and from a space of shame and from a space of fear and from a space of deep, deep humiliation. Self-awareness is just to look at it without judgment. That can only come after that gaze, that rachamim, which allows das. Can you do that? Can you be curious? When my child says something, compassion. Be curious. When somebody else says something, instead of reaching conclusions, be curious. When you say something inside your own brain, it's the hardest. Mental chatter, the mental chatter. Can I be curious? Can I just be curious? Can I just look at it? Rachamim, that is midas harachamim. To feel what it is. Whatever it is, there's pain there. But that rachamim will produce bina, lahavin, or lahaskel, lishmaya, lilmoid, or lalamed. It's one of the most beautiful interpretations in Zohar. The opening, Moshe Rabbeinu. So there's already dam, tzvardeya, kinim, oroiv, dever, Shdever, and Shchin and Barat. 7 plagues he delivered. And suddenly, a new parsha, Vayemra Hashem el Moshe, Boy el Parai. Come to Parai, ki ani echbadati es libai, because I made his heart rough. And the Zohar says, in English, we don't say, Moshe, come to Parai. We say, Moshe, go to Parai. Lech el Parai. And what does the Zohar say? All previous times, Moshe never met Parai in his inner bedroom, in his inner sanctuary. All the other meetings were at the Nile River. All the other meetings were in the courtyard, in the garden, in the outer chamber, in the foyer, in the dining room, the family room, the living room. I live in Muncie. We have rooms. I know Brooklyn. This time, Boyal Parai, Moshe is going to go in. He says, Idrin lifnime Idrin, Cheder lifnime Cheder, go into the innermost chamber of Parai. V'dachil Moshe, Moshe was frightened. So I can't face Parai on that level. On the outside, yeah, there's a support system. So Hashem can't say go. He said, I can't. He said, Boyal Parai, come to Parai. Come, I'll hold your hand. You're not going to Parai, you're coming to Parai with me. But what are the next words? Ki ani hichbadati es libai. Because I made his heart tough. I made his heart tough. How is that an explanation? The answer is, what you're so afraid of is also me. What you are so frightened of, I'm also there. Don't be afraid to face Parai in his innermost chamber, to face those skeletons, to face those demons I escaped from so many years. Don't be afraid. I'm holding your hand and I'm going to take you, but I want you to know something more. As you face Parai and you look him in the eyes with compassion, there'll be das. And suddenly, that strong, powerful, unbreachable pit in the peach. Do you know that one of the hardest materials in our physical world is the pit of a peach? The waist? Try eating it. You're going to have to go to the dentist. Take a hammer and kraches, yeah? Kraches. It's not going to happen. The hammer wird sich zerbrechen. It's fascinating. Try it out. You have to be a Shimshon HaGibber to break it, or you got to know what you're doing. Why? Because in that pit are the seeds that guarantee the future. Zarei boy. So the Rebbeinu Shalom made that you cannot crack that pit easily. But you know what happens? The pit of the peach falls onto the earth, and in the earth, after a few days, the pit just opens up, and the seeds are in the earth, and a new peach tree grows. The earth just, it opens up. We all have that pit. We're afraid. We try to crush it. You can't. You know why? It has your DNA. It has your growth. It has your atzmius. That roughness is coming from me. Even those protectors that are so powerful, don't be afraid. Hashem says, I'm there. Because what happens here is, in this process, every emotion that comes up in your brain and in your heart, every physical sensation, every experience, every idea, every thought, as painful, as crazy, as insane, as excruciatingly difficult, as ferociously scary as it is, know the truth. It's an invitation for redemptive self-awareness. Every thought when it comes in, don't judge. Stop. Go deep inside. Boyel parai, Hashem says. Compassion. Das. And suddenly, you're going to become curious. What is this emotion telling me? What did my child's comment just do for me? And you know what will happen? After a few months, we will grow up. After a few years, we will become transformed people. We're not used to this. We're used to, I'm the mashpia, you're the makabel, you just told me something, you triggered me, I will scream at you, or I'm a nice guy, I'll run away for 3 years emotionally, or I'm even a nicer guy, so I'm going to freeze for 10 years emotionally. And in my eyes, I'm self-righteous. What I didn't do is, as we spoke Friday night, the Moira Nayim, between triggers, between stimuli and response, there's a space. And in that space is where human choice lives. In that space is where the Tzelem Elokim lives. The stimuli came, the trigger came, the arrow came into my chest. I don't want to respond from a place of instinctiveness, which may be defined by so many of my own protectors. But I really want to ask a much deeper question. What just came up for me? The only way you can do this is with compassion. If there's no compassion, you will never be able to do this because it's too painful. Rachamim, rachamim, rachamim on yourself. Have compassion for that experience. And now, talk to me, my kleine baby inside. My einige baby, nicht the größte baby, the kleine baby. Talk to me. What just came up? Your daughter just said something. She's 17 years old. You've been struggling for 4 years. She just made another comment as she opened the refrigerator and spoke about the nature of the food that you prepare in this house. From the food, she went to discuss the nature of your motherhood. From there, she explores your identity. From there, she goes on to explain to us your conscious and your subconscious, how you're mothering the other children. And of course, all of this is done with eloquence, with drama, with perfect language, straight from Shakespeare or Hemingway. And you fell asleep. Or you could do it the other way around. Father, mother. Instead of running, can I be there with full compassion for myself so now I can have full compassion for my child? Avinu of harachamon hamerachim, rachem na aleinu, v'sein b'libeinu bina lahavin ulahaskel, lishmoya. He doesn't say to teach, lishmoya, lilmoid, and then ulalamed. I have learned in my work, all speaking is really about listening. There's no speaking without listening. Look who's talking. I told you I'm doing therapy. Lishmoya lilmoid. Then ulalamed. And even with the lalamed, I need a lishmar. I need a lasa. I said, let me tell you something else. Every child you're struggling with will reveal another emotion in me or in you that needs healing. And maybe when one layer was dealt with, another layer will emerge. You'll say there was one child, I was calm breathing, and now there's a second one. At this point, I was choking, and now there's a third one. At this point, Ana aniba. Isn't that what Yaakov told Reuven? I lost Yosef, I lost Shimon, and now you want to take away Binyamin. This I can't survive. 3, I can't. And yet in our generation, there are parents sitting here with one child struggling, 2 children struggling, 3 children struggling, 4 children struggling, 5 children struggling, sometimes more. You heard Reb Shimon's story Friday night. I don't have an answer, but I do say compassion. Compassion for yourselves, parents. Cut yourself slack. Don't go into the work of self-blame and self-loathing and guilt. First of all, nurture yourselves. Forgive me. Nurture yourselves. Nurture yourselves physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, whatever that nurture looks like. You need to be empowered. You need to have stamina. You need to have koiches hanefesh. You need to have simchas hachaim. You need to have vigor. But let's go one step deeper. Every child will challenge me to confront things that will allow me infinite growth that I could have never experienced without this. So you might say, why me and not my sister? And why me and not my brother? And why through such pain? And why through such circumstances? I'll go to therapy for 45 years. I don't have the answer to why. Why? I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is, in fact, I live every day with the question, why? Why? When I was born, they said, why? I'm trying to answer the question. Already at the bris, you understand what I'm dealing with? At the bris, they want to know why? So I'm trying to answer. Not such a joke, by the way, but we're not going to get there. Therapy has its limits also. I can live as a victim. We all do that. It's normal. It's easy. It's actually very Jewish. You krecht, yeah? How you doing? Hoi, 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 Baruch Hashem, miserable. How you doing? I'm about to die. I thought I died yesterday. I'm going to die tomorrow. I'm having a heart attack. I almost had a heart attack. I have COVID. I'm in the middle of COVID. The 4th time COVID. The 7th time COVID. I'm coming down with COVID in a few minutes. Okay. Yidalach, gewaldig, yeah? I'm still looking for a Yid today. How are you? Rabbi YY, perfect. Ich hab noch nicht begegnet als ein Yid. The best you hear is, not too bad. Probably made $20 million that day. When somebody says, not too bad, I ask for an adova. Gedalia knows, right? Not too bad. Gib a million. Meiser, Chaimish, gib a million. Yeah. We could be victims. You know why? It's normal. But with rachamim, you can open yourself up to a deeper truth and be curious and ask myself, what do I have now an opportunity to fix? I promise you, our children go through their journeys, but their journeys become part of our journeys. And we could look at this from a perspective of exile, victimhood, or from a perspective of redemptive, geula, expansive consciousness. And that means, let me be curious and find out how this is an opportunity for my deeper awareness, for my expansiveness, for going into a deeper place, into my neshama, into my brain, for becoming a more honest person, a more authentic person, a more real person, a less judgmental person, a true ambassador of the Ribbono Shel Olam in this world, not an egotistical, traumatized, narcissist victim who uses religion as a camouflage for my own insecurities. Did you understand what I just said? Get out. Okay. One of the best Chelm stories, I always love this story, it's so classic. If it would be a Chelm story, Mela. But it happens, I think, also in the United States of America. Right, this guy from Chelm is coming home from shul, and he's looking for something under the lantern. You know, they had those lanterns at night, lanternics, to light up the streets, and he's looking, and his chava says, Yankel, what are you searching for? He says, I'm trying to get home, and I lost the keys to my home. So I'm looking for them. He says, where did you lose them? He said, I lost them a few blocks away. So he says, why are you searching here? He says, because here there's light, over there it's dark. I love to search for things, thank you, but if you have a cup, it would be better. If not, it's good. It's fine, you can leave it. Thank you. If there's light, I'm happy to search. It's gewaldig to do b'dikas chametz, where everything is open. But then you don't need b'dikas chametz. B'dikas chametz is b'chayrim u'bizdakim. Thank you. That's for you. That's for you. It's a gift. It's a gift for being in the front seat and listening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Of course, it's easy to search where there's light. And we have to search where there's light. I have to go to the obvious places, of course. Doesn't mean b'dikas chametz that you only look in the holes. You're also allowed to look at your counter. There may even be pizza in your freezer. You should get rid of it before Pesach. I don't only have to go under the couch, right? I think the halacha, no? That you don't only have to go into the holes. You're also allowed to look at the obvious sewer systems. Look at the obvious dysfunction. Obviously. Like Kaima L'Shaila. But here I have an opportunity not to be like the Jew from Chelm. And to say where it's dark, that's exactly where I may have lost it. Or as Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jewish people 3,300 years ago, Ubikashtem misham es Hashem Elokecha u'matzasa. Zog the Balatanya in Lekutei Torah, Ubikashtem misham es Hashem Elokecha. Don't look for Hashem here. You have to look misham. You have to look lechapes b'makom shenevda ha'aveda. I have to search where I lost the aveda. Can I go to that place where I lost that aveda? Mamas and tatas, Brider and Schwester, can you and I go back to that place where we lost our innocence, where we lost our ability to feel validated, where we lost our real inner sense of worth and wholeness as the light of Hashem in this world? Can I go to that place where I was lost, where my inner core was lost, where I had to go offline, where things had to shut down inside of me? It's dark there. It's dark. There's no light there. It's an aveda. Ubikashta misham. And when you're going to go there, you're going to see ani hichbadati aslibai. Hashem is there waiting. Your neshama, your chelik elikami mal is always there waiting. That crust, that toughness, that ichbadati aslibai is eclipsing your sweetness, your infinity. And then when I can emerge back into the dining room or into the kitchen or into the living room with my child, I could look at them with those eyes of innocence, with those eyes of purity, with those eyes of transcendence, with those eyes of kedusha, with those eyes of elikus. It's all three words. We say it every Monday and Thursday, unless you're lucky enough to daven in my show where there's no tachnon. Habeit mishamayim ure'ei. Right? Look from heaven and see. But it's not, we're not talking only to Hashem. We're talking also to the Hashem inside of me. Habeit mishamayim ure'ei. Reb Simcha Binim of Pshischa said, Medaf kuken av zachen, mit a himmlische kuk. Habeit mishamayim. Can you look at your child from a heavenly perspective? Ure'ei. Can I look at my child not from the place of my triggers, of my insecurities, of my deep unresolved wounds? Habeit mishamayim. Can you look at your child from your own heaven? Can you look at yourself, mishamayim? Because only when I look at myself, mishamayim, can I look at you and my child and my student and my disciple, mishamayim ure'ei. Now let me say something. We talk all about Yeridas Hadoros, you know, how horrible we all are. Ach shadari bitmia, but there's also another dimension. We get closer and closer to Geula. every day, and that means we become better and deeper and pure. And I think what we're seeing is this. The Navi Daniel says that when Mashiach comes, before Mashiach comes, Yizbararu, V'yislabnu, V'yitzarfu Rabim. The ultimate birur is going to happen. That means all of the toxicity, all of the negativity, all of the evil is going to come to the fore, and we're all going to get scared. Ma'asalanu Hashem kacha. Ma'asalana, you saw what happened in Israel over the last week. Who can believe? Mi Pillel Zois. The great expert on child abuse. The one who changed the vocabulary in the frum world in Israel. Nobody could believe it, and everybody was saying they're all guilty of a conspiracy theory. So now the abused victims have to be murdered a second time by nobody believing them. And people get so discouraged. People get so downtrodden. People feel that they have to despair. There's so many cover-ups. Vani hakatenoimer lavdavka. I say to you that this is a time when the avodas habirurim is being finished. When the clarity is coming to the fore. When we're going to be able to see clearly light from darkness, truth from falsehood, superficiality from depth, real Yiddishkeit versus fake Yiddishkeit. Fake Yiddishkeit is powerful. Fake Yiddishkeit is very powerful. Some of you have been victims of it for many years, and some of your children have been victims of it. It's the fake Yiddishkeit where we use God to traumatize people, where we use God as an excuse not to think, not to use our brains, not to use our hearts, where we use God to cover up lies, where we use God to feel arrogant and elite, this elitism of us versus them, the successful Jews versus the losers, the students who have a right to thrive versus the students, the Nebuch cases. But in a time of birur, things come to the fore, and when things come to the fore, you need people of courage, people of leadership, people of authenticity to stand up and embrace the souls of every single Jew of our generation and realize that in previous generations, when all these emotions came up, we had the chelem choice, and it worked. My key is not there. There's nothing there. You look under the light, and we'll invent a new key. It doesn't open to the house, we'll build a new house. You don't have a house, that's why there's a sukkah. We'll figure it out. But there comes a time before Geula that every nitzutz needs a tikkun, and every spark needs a birur. That option doesn't exist anymore. And who are at the forefront of this tikkun? Our children. They're telling us, stop running. Chevre, stop running. Hisoiriri, wake up. But you know why you should wake up? Not because tragedy is coming. Kiva oirech, because your light is coming. Kumi oiri, stand up and shine. Uri, shir daberi, wake up, sing. Kvoid Hashem alayich nigla. The glory of Hashem is being revealed on each and every one of you. And for that infinite oneness to be revealed on me and on you and on you, I need to spit out all of those beliefs that are toxic, all of those beliefs that me or you or my child or my student is anything but a manifestation of divine love and divine light, is a manifestation of emes la'amita, is a manifestation of the greatest depth and beauty and holiness to remove all the chatzitzim and all the mechitzas. All the chatzitzas, all the mechitzas. Everything that's coming up. Don't get afraid. Boy el paroi. We can go in now to the deepest chambers where Paroi sits in his own majesty and nobody ever wants to go there. Hashem says, but there's no Yitzias Mitzrayim if you're not going to go into Paroi. If you're not going to go into Paroi, you will not have Yitzias Mitzrayim. I say, I don't want that. Let's stay in Galus. Do me a favor. Let me rewind the tape recorder of history. Tape recorder, alav hashalom, pun intended. Rewind the tape recorder of history. Just 30 years, 20 years, you remember? But we're marching towards Exodus. We're marching towards Yitzias Mitzrayim. Boy el Pari, go into that place. I can't. And Hashem says, I got it. I'm coming. And when you come with me, you'll see. I'm right there. I'm right there. You have nothing to fear. Stay with the emotion and let the pit open up. But you need earth to open the pit of the peach. V'nafshi ka'afar lakaltia. We call it humility. If there's an ounce of spiritual arrogance in this process, we lose the plot. Humility, ka'afar. When I can be humble, when I can be open, what does Hashem want for me at this moment? The pit's open. And suddenly you see, thank you. And suddenly I realize there is a beautiful holiness here that's waiting to be revealed, that's waiting to be set free, that's waiting to be emancipated. Somebody once asked Michelangelo, how he managed to sculpture David. How do you do it? And he said, I saw the angel trapped in the marble, and I chiseled away on the marble, and I set the angel free. How do I do that? Don't be afraid of the marble. See the angel trapped in the marble. See the angel trapped in your marble, in my marble, in our marbles. And in every person I meet, beginning with my loved ones, my students, my disciples, my chaverim, my children, my grandchildren, my nephews, my nieces, my friends' children, my neighbors' children. And I have to say, maybe this is in parentheses, but probably not. The only way this can be done successfully is if husband and wife resolve the tension in their marriages. Because when the curveball of those children comes, if there's no fortress in the home, if there's no united front, destruction happens fast and swift. We don't have answers to questions, but together we can confront every challenge. Husbands and wives who use this opportunity to work out their issues. We have issues. The only people I know who don't have marital issues are the people I don't know. The only ones. They once asked, there was a linguistic professor, so he asked the students in high school, in English, what's the difference between an engagement and a battle? So one of the students said, one is before the wedding, one is after the wedding. And our dear beloved friend, Rabbi Russell, Thursday night, presented a profound and eloquent observation of how to begin to heal those things. But what I want to say is, it's so important not to blame each other. It's so important not to judge each other. You and your husband, you and your wife will have different perspectives about a lot of these things. And we have to figure out a way of how to learn to navigate the journey. But one thing you can't afford to do, and that is invalidate each other. Add to the suffering through invalidation, through judgmentalism, through dismissiveness. It is so important for husbands and wives to create space for each other in this process so that together they can emerge united, unified. And the only way you can do this is midas harachamim, compassion. Tanya, he says, midas harachamim is mavriach min hakotza el hakotza. Briach hatichoin, it's Yaakov Avinu, it says in Zoyar, Yaakov's midas min hakotz lakotza. It reaches from the highest space to the lowest space. In other words, you could be in the highest and you could be in the lowest space. There's always room for compassion. Always compassion. And when there's compassion, I can become understanding of what's happening inside of you, and you can understand what's happening inside of me. And together we may not always agree, but there is a support system in the house that the children will see. That girl of yours, that boy of yours, every time they come down to the kitchen, which may be once in 72 hours, when they come in and they feel that energy of Tati and Mami, who really are having a good time with each other, trust me, the healing that happens at that moment is very profound, even if right now it's not coming out. It creates a sense of wholeness, of security, of confidence in the home that will help that child go through their journey and hopefully, Be'ezer Hashem, heal their trauma. But as one does this, we now come to something else. Again, I say it in parentheses, but maybe not in parentheses. Reb Shimon alluded to it. This is feedback to stories of Shabbos. Advice is important, but you have to know who you're asking advice from. I ask of you, speak to people, but speak to people to quote Reb Shimon, was kennen the sugya. They have to know the sugya. They have to know the sugya. You can have a guy, a man, a woman, wonderful people, scholars, yirei shamayim. None of their children put them through this type of ringer. They never learned this. They never learned about trauma. They never had to learn about it. Baruch Hashem, they have a different journey. They may mean well. Beautiful. We needed a little music to loosen that up. Thank you. Yeah, music in the house is good. Music in the house is good. The man may mean well, the woman may mean well, but they really don't understand that. They just don't understand it. And you come, you're so searching, you're so thirsty for something to hold on to. There's a shipwreck. There's a shipwreck. The Titanic is sinking. Right? And you're looking for a piece of wood to hold on to. And this person has a name, right? So you go consult. And because you've been through so much pain, you know, your husband or the wife says, we have to listen. We just have to listen. Only one problem. The person really has no experience. They may have textbook knowledge. But if they have not dealt with real people, real children, real teenagers, they don't know what those tattoos look like. They don't know what the heroin looks like. They haven't spent time with them. They haven't seen the pain, the frustration. They don't know what an overdose is. They may have read an article somewhere about it. They haven't sat there with the parents sitting shiva for the child who overdosed. They haven't. Maybe they have sitting there, but they didn't take the time for whatever reason. Maybe it's not their thing to really educate themselves. What trauma is. What it looks like when a child is broken within. They're saying logical things like, you have to tell her that in our house we believe in tznius. Go'oinus. You have to explain to him that we're a house of Yirei Shamayim. Outside the house, we respect you. Wow. Such tolerance. It's like so logical, right? Because you're talking to a prefrontal. Yeah. Mayach Shala, the Viga's brain is open. You hear the word? It's a deep word. In our house, you ever tried this? In our house, what you do in your house, in your room, we respect. We're the democracy. We're America. George Washington. Boundaries. Respect. But at the Shabbos table, this is the chadin in my house. So there's two dinim. There's shnei dinim. Right? Prefrontal. There's a din in my house, and there's a chalois by you. So you tried it, right? And it worked wonders. So he didn't come down for 6 months. Because he was toifas the svara very deeply. If somebody doesn't know the Imay Anoichi B'tzara, they may be a top therapist. They may be a Gevaldik Yirei Shamayim. Maybe a person who knows Choshe Mishpat, Evena Ezer, Yeredeya. Milk in the cholent, they're the experts. No question. You're having a din Torah with your partner, at the Bagamvent to Bagazelt, Keminig Hanagidim Amaforsamim. He's the expert. He's the expert. You forgot Yalav Yavoy on Chavches Tevis? It's a brilliant question, by the way. Think about it. He's the expert. I'm also the expert on that. Come to me. If you forgot Yalav Yavoy Chavches Tevis. Important questions, by the way. I'm not a broken teenager whose life is on the line. A girl or boy cutting themselves. Stone drunk every night, 3 o'clock in the morning. Isolated in a room. You need to speak to people who really get this. Somebody who doesn't, gesundheit. And you know what? Mami and Tati, don't shut down your brains and feelings. Be educated consumers. Nobody can tell you what to do for your children. People can advise you. And if it resonates and you see it successful, run with it. But don't become passive victims of other people's advice. Because, let's face it, what a mami and a tati can do for a child, no therapist, no rav, No Rosh Yeshiva, no psychiatrist, no psychoanalyst, no psychotherapist can do for your child. They can all help. They can all help. They can all give advice. Some of them are tzaddikim. Some of them are brilliant. But what a tati and a mommy can do, nobody can do. Which now brings us, my dearest friends, to the children themselves. Over Shabbos, people ask the following question. And it's a heart-wrenching question. They came to me. I was trying to get to my room for around 9 hours. When I got to my room, and you know how Jews are, right? Every man, I meant a small shiloh. Right? And then he's like, I went through a lot of trauma. Small shiloh, thank you. Women are not like that. Women are, when are you going to have time? They know that it's not a small shiloh, yeah? But the men are used to conversations that end after 60 seconds, because after that we go into the zone of nothingness. So it's fine. Okay, Shine. We're not doing any male bashing today. I'm a man. I respect you guys. But one of the big questions, anyway, so 9 hours I was trying to get to my room. I finally escaped. When somebody asked me a question on the parsha, I knew it's time to escape, okay? Question on the parsha we'll do next week. We'll do Yisro, Mishpatim, Tetzava, we'll do question on the parsha. So I said, let's talk later. I ran up. The Eibishter geholfen, my door was locked. No key. So I said, okay, hineni. It's time to go back down, but I'll hide in the library with the svarim so I could finish some of my shiurim. So I went in the library, somebody was waiting. Oh, Baruch Hashem, you're here, Bashgacha Pratis. It's always Bashgacha Pratis. And that was the end. And then it was already time for Tikkun Chatzos a few hours later. But one of the big questions is, the question, Ma chatasi, what did we do so bad? You know, my sister, 12 kids, yeah. Everyone went through the conveyor belt. You know the conveyor belt? I once asked a Rav, what's your mission statement in shul? He says, my vision from my kehillah is 3 things. I hatch them, I match them, I dispatch them. Next, Dor hoylech v'dor ba. Yeah. And they make it look so easy, right? They make it look so easy. And before you know it, they had a baby, and next thing, mitzvah tans. In between, there was 17 years, 20 years. Next generation. And suddenly these parents are standing and said, you know, are we so bad? Are we so evil? Have we sinned so much? Is this our Gehenna? One person told me over Shabbos, he says, I was told that God doesn't give you a test that you can't withstand. So he gave me a test with 1 child, I withstood it. So he gave me a test with a 2nd child, I withstood it. So now he sees that I'm withstanding tests. So he decided I'm going to be the guinea pig. And now another child and another child. So my resolution is I'm stopping to withstand tests. Gege finzich zweite. Or as Tuvia says, I know we're the chosen people. Can't you choose somebody else? Just for a couple of years. And people say, you know what? There's a lot of anger at Hashem. People ask me, I'm allowed to be angry. I said, that's not the question. Answer me if you're angry. I was told I'm not allowed to be angry. I said, I know what you were told. I know what you were told. They told me, Kol hakayas kilu oived avodah zara. I know what you were told, but tell me if you're angry. Oh, am I angry? Oh, am I angry? Does God hate me? Is he going to punish me with another child? Going off this path because of my anger at him. Wow. Those are heavy questions. And I'm going to say what I'm going to say now with a lot of compassion, with a lot of love to everyone sitting in this room, with a lot of sensitivity. As a brother speaks to brothers, and as a brother speaks to sisters, we need to go through a paradigm shift. I'm not here to tell you a vart. People stopped me, say something of chizuk. Sorry, I'm not a vendor machine. Sorry. I don't have that vart of chizuk. You know, you put in a quarter. They're not even putting in a quarter, but whatever. Just check. Boom. Chizuk. Rabbi YY, chizuk. Give me a clip right here, right now. Give me the clip. Ainley, the vending machine is empty. We got to refill it. But we need to go through a paradigm shift. You don't need a chizuk vart. You don't need a shalashudas vart. You don't need a sermon. You don't need a drasha. You don't even need a shiur. They're all good, but it's not what you need. What we need is an internal, transformational, existential paradigm shift. Hast verstanden? Wir darf haben an innerliche, psychologische, emotionelle und geistige Überkenntnis. Jetzt versteht ihr? Okay, you want Galiciana Yiddish. Okay. What we need is, we need to turn over a kishkes. You like my Galiciana Yiddish? Okay. And let me illustrate. I finished a shiur once before Purim in Monsey, a woman's class in our tent in Monsey every Tuesday. A woman comes over to me. She says, I hate Purim. I'm like, why? I'm thinking, of course, she's giving too many shalach manasin. The shalach manasin are too fancy. She's preparing 2 months in advance, and she's stressed. So even before listening, I say, you know, shalach manas you have to give to one person, an orange and a hamantash in a brown bag. You remember those shalach manasin? Like Yuzeda used to give? In Kraka. A brown bag, yeah? An orange and a hamantash. They even did it in New York in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. You don't need a $399 shalach manas with a fake violin that is going to last till the next day, Shushan Purim, in the morning. When your tzatzka breaks your tzatzka. You really don't need that. In fact, I know you love me without the violin. I like hamantashen. I don't need your violins. You want to send sushi? So send sushi, noch besser. But I'm already giving her a sermon to give her a nice Purim. I said, find one friend. She says, no, it's not my issue. I said, what's your issue? She says, I cry every year for Esther. I said, okay. This is original. Was hast du mit Esther? Does she have a story from her school? What happened with Esther? Did Esther grow up in Monroe and Williamsburg and Borough Park and Monsey and Lakewood and Meir Sharim, Kiyasefa, B'nai Brak? What happened to Esther? So she looks at me and she says, Rabbi YY, think about it. The Jews are saved. They kill out all their enemies in Shushan. They go home and they feast and they party. Well, Esther couldn't be part of it. She was stuck with a Persian shikr, mit a melech tippish, mit a beheme gasa in the palace, stuck with him. Nothing of her childhood, her community, her Jewish marriage. And that's how she lived till her last breath. Where is the empathy for Esther? I can't celebrate Purim. I'm like, wow, you just got me thinking. And it's not often that a rabbi thinks. Actually, that was bad. Okay, if I wasn't fired yet, you say. Shrine Gadal, you have a job for me? You'll still talk to me or no? I love rabbis. I'm a rabbi. But it's not often that we get, you get a question and you actually think. Without like, yes, station, Samagan Avram, the knee-jerk answers. Yeah, it's a pashtadach. So I'm like, whoa, I got to think about this. So I breathed, I grounded myself, of course. You'll explain your husbands what I mean. And I thought about it for a few moments. And then I said, it's a good question, it's a deep question. But I think I may have an insight that may be worthwhile to reflect. And I said, be honest with me. It's 1938. It's 1938. And you're given an opportunity to marry Heinrich Himmler, Yemach Shemai, Adolf Eichmann, Yemach Shemai, Göring, Goebbels, Mengele. And you'll be with them in their home. Even you're invited to go to the Berghof of the Yemach Shemoinik himself. I'm not going to say his name. And you'll be with him. It's devastating. It's surreal. It's beyond painful. But it's one more thing I want you to remember. As a result of that relationship, not one Jew will be murdered between 1938 and 1945. The entire Holocaust will be avoided. And I said to her, at your last breath, will you look back at your life and say, what a horrific life? Or will you look back at your life and say, thank you. Ashreinu matoiv chalkenu. Manoyim goyroli. Mayofa Yerushasi. Yes, I did not follow the trajectory of the valedictorian of Beis Yaakov that I was. I know. I didn't live up to the expectations of Beis Ruchel, Beis Yaakov, B'nai Surah, Beis Rivka, B'nai Siyan, B'nai Schanya, Brur Yeshulamis, Nineveh, Rachel, Chana, Dvaira. I did not. And at some point she turns to Mordechai and says, I'm the wrong woman. You don't understand. I'm a good Beis Yaakov girl. I was supposed to get married, live a life of Torah, Kedusha, Yireh Shamayim. And Mordechai doesn't have an answer, but he says to her 6 words that change history. Umi yodeya im le'eis kazois higat l'malchus. And I once heard from the Rebbe, he said, he should have said, Ani yodeya, I know. He said, no, I don't know. Mi yodeya. There are things in life that are beyond das. Don't try to wrap your brain around what your shlichus in this world is. Mi yodeya. It wasn't like, who knows? Mi yodeya, there are things you cannot wrap your brain around why Hashem chose this person for this mission. But what I want to tell you is le'eis kazois higat l'malchus. Your neshama came down for this very moment to be boyel paroi, to be in the chamber of Achashverosh, and the Holocaust of that generation was avoided. Minar v'ad zokein taf v'noshim b'yoyim echad. We could sit here today and think about our children 2,500 years later because of one woman who understood in a moment of truth. You have to have a paradigm shift and ask not what God can do for you, but ask what you can do for God. Ask not what your children can do for you, but what you can do for your children. Ask not how everything can fit into my box based on how I define my mission in life, but ask, what's the le'eis kazois higati l'malchus? What is my mission? What is my shlichus at this moment? What is the Ratzoin Hashem? What does my mission consist of? And in fact, you'll see. Adayim, we read a Megillah. We're soon going to read it. Next month. Well, actually, 3 months, 2 months, 3 months. I would expect it to be called Megillas Mordechai. He was the man. Rosh Sanhedrin. Call it Megillas Mordechai ve'Esther. Call it Megillas Esther or Mordechai. No. There's one name. Megillas Esther. This is the story of Esther. The Gemara says in Megillah Dav Zayin, some of you just finished learning it, Esther is the one who made the Yom Tov, initiated the Yom Tov. The Chachamim didn't want. Chachamim said, nah, anti-Semitism. The Gemara says, Dav Zayin Amar Aleph, Kina ata moireres banu. Esther said, Kasvu niledoides, kavu niledoides. I need to become an intergenerational, eternal story. Why? Because Esther sagt die Gemara in Chulin Kuf Lamed Tes, Esther min ha-Torah minayin, Anoichi haster, aster panai bayoim hahu. Hester is the moment of concealment. There's darkness. I don't see a purpose. I don't see a mission. What am I trying to do as a Jewish father and mother? Raise these kids. What am I trying to do? Make a Shabbos table where they sing Zmiris and share Divrei Torah. What am I trying to do? Have a frum home. What am I trying to do? Create an atmosphere of simcha. Create an atmosphere of avos Hashem, avos HaTorah. Ma pishi o ma chatosi. Everybody sitting in this room, tell me. What is your great sin? That you're trying to raise families that are saturated with avos HaTorah, with Yiras Shamayim. Aster panai bayoim hahu. It's a time of Esther, of concealment. But you know what Esther's revolution was? She made a paradigm shift. She wasn't anymore the sweet, innocent mommy who just follows that path and when things are shaken up, falls into depression and says, why, I'm such a bad girl, I'm such a bad lady. Look at my sister, my sister-in-law, my aunt, my mother. Or the father looks in his eyes, in himself, and he says, I must be such a Rasha Marusha. What have I done wrong? This is so crazy. It's Esther panei bayom hahu. Esther stopped. Esther went away from that. You know why? Because when I'm in that mode, there's no compassion, there's no das, and I cannot be a leader. I cannot be a parent. I am a victim. I am an angry, frustrated, lonely, despondent human being. These are normal emotions. Lonely, despondent, depressed, angry. Normal. Don't judge them. Don't judge them. Have compassion for them. And take a deep breath and go a step deeper and say, God is not punishing me. God is not even preparing me for Olam Haba only. God is not even only giving me things to crush me in Olam Haza so I get a beautiful Olam Haba to teach me lessons. It's much deeper. Friends, it's a generation right before Geula where you were given a shlichus. You're on a mission. Nobody here was sold. Everybody was sent. You were not sold. Nobody threw you into a dustbin. Nobody threw you into Gehenna. Nobody threw you into darkness. Every single person sitting here is a chelik eloka mal mamish that was sent into difficult places in order to bring the Aleph into Goyla and transform Goyla into Geula. The difference of exile and redemption is one letter. Aleph. Aleph is oneness. Echad. Achdus. Ein soif. Alufei shalolam. Go into your place of Echad, infinity, and then say, Le'ez kazoi sigati lemalchus. My wife and I, my husband and I, we, our children, our family, were sent on a shlichus to be able to heal souls, embrace hearts, lift up spirits, smile, hug, heal each other, heal ourselves, bring light, clarity. When you wake up in the morning, you say, Moidani lefanecha melechai v'chaim shechazarta b'nishmasi b'chemla Rabba emunasecha. Here is the meditation, my friends. We touch Rabba emunasecha. Great is your faithfulness. Great is your trust. We can trust you. It says in Medrash, you give us back our neshama. But there's a deeper pshat. Rabba emunasecha. Your emunah in me is so great that you have given me this child or these children for me to be able to lift them up, to polish their diamond, and to believe in them so that they will be able to believe in themselves, to be able to see their wholeness, their glory, their brightness, their innocence, their elikus. So they'll be able to see it in themselves. A young man met me Shabbos morning. A fayedike chsidische Yid. lives in New Jersey. I didn't ask him permission to say it over, so I'm not going to say a name. Of course, I once said a story and somebody said from the men's section, without names, who was it? But we'll keep it that way. I fired the Kiyid. And we were both taking a coffee in the morning, and he looks at me and he says, I came down 5 o'clock in the morning from my room one day. I get up 5 o'clock, I go to the mikveh, I learn, I daven, before I go to do my work, and it's Avodas HaKodesh Shalav. And it's 5 in the morning, and his teenage daughter is sitting on the couch, surrounded by a group of people, 5 in the morning, involved in a scene that he described to me, but I'm not going to graphically describe it to you, but truly, truly painful from a moral perspective. And he tells me, he says, Rabbi YY, you know me. I have a lot of love in my heart, but at that point I platzt. Wiffel is ashir. Ich bin euch a Mensch. Ich bin euch a Mensch. I platzt. I couldn't do it. I wanted to lose it. I wanted to take them all and throw them out of the house. What do? I felt a trigger. He has that space. I went to the space. I turned to the Rebbeinu Shalom. I said, Rebbeinu Shalom. Him you could say, give me a vart. That's a good vending machine. Give me a vart, give me a chizuk. And he said, I got it. It's a famous Maimon Chazal in Sefer Dvarim. Hashem says, bring joy to the ani, the ger, the yosem, the almana, the poor people, the foreigners, the orphans, the widows. And then v'samachta, I'll bring joy to you and your spouse and your son and your daughter. So Rashi quotes Chazal. Hashem says, Im ata mesameach es shali, ani mesameach es shalcha. If you bring joy to mine, to the poor person, to the widow, to the orphan, to the foreigner, refugee, the ger, the convert, I will bring joy to yours, you, your spouse, your children. And he says, and an epiphany dawned on me. Im ata mesameach es shali doesn't only mean if you bring joy to my people, to the poor Jews. Im ata mesameach es shali also means, can you bring simcha to the part of your child that belongs to me? Every child is shali. My child is not only my child. My child primarily is a piece of Hashem. He was given to me. She was given to me. Hashem says, Im ata mesameach es shali. There's a part of your child that belongs to me. It doesn't belong to you. Could you bring simcha to that part? Ani mesameach es shalcha. And then you will find simcha in the part of the child that you're connected to. And he said, I went into the room and I said, my daughter is a chelek eloka mimal mamish. She's a piece of Hashem going on a difficult journey. I smiled to her. I hugged her. I thanked her for being in the house. I thanked her for having such good friends. I thanked her for the opportunity that our home can be a place where they all enjoy life and chill out. And as the friends looked at her and they said, wow, you have such a cool father. Very cool. This is 5 o'clock in the morning on the way to the mikveh. Verstehst, on the way to his mikveh. He said, but at that moment, her trust in him intensified 10 times. Im ata mesameach es shali, harei ani mesameach es shalcha. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, his name was Rabbi YY Jacobson. I'm his namesake. He passed away Yud Shvat, Tovshin Yud, 1950 in America. He was saved from Nazi-occupied Warsaw. He came to America in March 1940, Adar Sheni Tovshin. There was a Yid I knew, his name was Rabbi Fogelman. He shared with me that the first Pesach he was in America, he was actually in Lakewood. In Lakewood, New Jersey, in somebody's home. And at one of the Sudas of Pesach, he was Fabringing. And he said these words, we say in Hallel, Ono Hashem ki ani avdecha. How do you teach it? How do you translate it? Most people will say, Ono Hashem, please Hashem. I'm your Eved, I'm your servant, take care of me. So, but that's not the case. Because the Ono is spelled Aleph, Nun, Hey. Ana, as in please, is spelled Aleph, Nun, Aleph, like Ana Hashem, Haishiana. But there it's spelled with a Hey. What does Ana with a Hey mean? Aleph, Nun, Hey? Where? Vu. Ana Selech, right? Where you going? He says, David HaMelech is saying something else. Ana Hashem, ki ani avdecha. Riboyne shel olam. Wo willst du? Ich soll sein heint. Ki ani avdecha. That's the paradigm shift. Ana Hashem. Hashem, where do you want me to be today? Ki ani avdecha. Because I am your ambassador. I am your servant. That's the paradigm shift that will transform your life, my life, our lives. From victims into shluchim. From despondent people who are struggling with something genuinely into empowered ambassadors and emissaries of the Ribono Shel Olam. Wake up in the morning and say, Ana Hashem, I have no agenda. Who decided what slichus in life looks like? Who knows why my neshama came down to the world? Who knows? Who's the expert, Zagmir? Who told me what my life is supposed to look like? Who defined that box? I thought we don't make images of Hashem. Who made an image of what my life is supposed to look like to be successful? What's the definition of a successful mother? Maybe you're carrying in your home one of the greatest, deepest souls, and I'm telling you, you are carrying in your home some of the greatest, deepest souls. And you, like Esther Hamalka, are going to illuminate the world. Ana Hashem. I don't have an agenda. I don't have a perspective what it has to look like. I can let go. I can surrender. And I can embrace life enthusiastically. And then you know what happens? And you're going to think maybe I'm a little strange. You can actually have fun. You can laugh. And you can giggle. And you can find your sense of humor. Somebody once wrote, a brilliant writer, he started off his book, Life is difficult. Once you know that, life can be fun. Life is difficult. Period. If you haven't figured it out, probably at this point you figured it out. Life is difficult. It's not just a breeze. It's not that. It's not just a bag of potato chips or Schmerling's chocolate. Schmerling's chocolate helps for the process, no question, if your nutritionist allows. For me, it's kale. Kale helps with the process. Life is difficult, but the moment you can embrace that, now have fun. This is it. Esther wasn't a miserable lady. Yosef HaTzadik wasn't a miserable man. He's the most charming, exciting person in the Tanakh. It's a fact. Why? He woke up in the morning and he said, Ana Hashem, Vu, just tell me where. No, but I had plans. I have to sit here. And now you're schlepping me away. He's not schlepping you away from anywhere. You were sent. Ana, ki ani avdecha. I am your light in this world. I am your ambassador in this world. I am your manifestation in this world. Right before Corona, literally a few days before March 2020, I was invited to go to Rostov on the Dan River in Russia. For the yahrzeit of the Rashab on Beis Nissen, it was 100th year, 1920, 2020, Tafresh Pei, Tafshin Pei. I needed to renew my passport. The problem is the flight was getting very close. And I needed the express passport service. So, we have in Muncie somebody known as the passport lady. And I went for a visit. One night I called up, I need a passport express. Of course, like every Jew, I need it tonight. No, I had a few days, a week, whatever it was. No problem. Did the signatures, did whatever you have to do to make a passport, the pictures. The woman turns to me and says, I owe you a profound debt of gratitude. I said, why? She says, I live here in Monsey with my husband. We have a beautiful family. One boy, Shmuley, began struggling with Yiddishkeit very, very heavily. It was extremely difficult for us. Through unconventional means, he found another wonderful Jewish girl who grew up in Lakewood by the name of Rachel. And they befriended each other. And they developed this relationship. They really liked each other. Whatever I tried, my husband tried, wasn't successful. It seemed like he has left Yiddishkeit. They decided to get married. And they wanted a beautiful, big, extravagant Jewish wedding. Not a very wealthy family. And I thought to myself, this is going to be a wedding that is not going to adhere to the standards of most of our weddings, in terms of dress, in terms of music, in terms of ambiance, in terms of people, in terms of environment. And I spoke to a few people, and my husband spoke to a few, and they all said the same thing. Why throw out $30,000 for a wedding that you don't approve of? For a wedding that you're embarrassed of? Your husband is a graduate of the Mir in Brooklyn, and a graduate of Nei Yisrael in Toronto, and a Talmid Chacham, and a Yid who goes through Shas. As I was in the house, he was finishing Psachim and Kiddushin together for the Siyam and Erev Pesach. 5-6 blot a day. A big Talmid Chacham. It's going to be a busha for you. It's going to be a busha for him, for you, for your family. Let them make a small wedding. You contribute the herring. Cost you $6.99 in Evergreen in Monsey. You want a $10.99 or $10.99? Better they want sponge cake, seltzer, you'll send some seltzer. They can invite their friends and do their disco music. $30,000 I have to spend. And this woman tells me, my husband and I looked at each other and say, no. We made a decision the first day, we're going to be close to Shmuley. And if this is the wedding he wants, this is the wedding we're going to pay for, with the money that we're going to have to find, like many weddings. And we're going to be there, and we're going to dance, and we're going to celebrate, and we're going to embrace these kids. And we're going to enjoy the wedding. Let the comments be whatever they are. And where did they want the wedding? In Lakewood. Not in Mount Clair. Not in the Philippines. Not in the Chabad House of San Francisco. But in Lakewood. In one of the big halls of Lakewood. And she paid $30,000 for the wedding. And it was a wedding. And people had what to say. And the music was not exactly V-I-D, V-I-D, V-I-D. It wasn't even, Feratsta. But they got married. It was a kosher wedding. And they danced and they enjoyed. And they're now on the way home. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30 in the morning, driving from Lakewood to Monsey. You ever do that drive after a wedding? Especially when you're the mother of the chassan. And you're driving yourself, and it's 1 hour and 45 minutes. And it never ends. And it's a boring drive, forgive me. We love Lakewood, we love Monsey. But it's a long drive, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And you're exhausted. And she turns to her husband and says, I have to say, I feel guilty. So many people made this comment that it was the wrong thing. It was giving a hechsher with $30,000 for nishkin Yiddish, nishkin Torah dike chasana, kama Yiddish chasana. I feel bad. Not just the waste of money, Was it the right decision? Did we give a hechsher for such a wedding? And she's like, I should be happy. My son got married tonight. But I'm not. I'm feeling down. So her husband, as a good husband, listens. You heard what I just said, or you weren't listening? how can I be here for you? She says, I need a little therapy. He says, well, where are we going to get a therapist 2 o'clock in the morning? Who are we going to call? And she said, Rabbi YY. And she went to YouTube in the car, or whatever website she went to, and she typed in Rabbi YY Jacobson. And there I was driving with them from Lakewood to Muncie, 2:30 now in the morning. And she said, Rabbi YY, I kid you not, as we put it on, you speak to the crowd and you say, I want to share a story with you. And this is the story I shared that family heard that night driving back from their son's wedding. And the story I said, I heard from the person himself. I was standing at a funeral, and there was an elderly Jew, almost 90 years old. His name was Reb David Edelman. He lived in Springfield, Massachusetts. Today he passed away already. And as we're waiting for the coffin, for the Aron, I said, Reb David, tell me a story. We're standing right there on the street waiting for the Aron. And he says, Reb Yosef Yitzchok, ich will dir erzählen, in Geschmack Yiddish, ich will dir erzählen am Eise. I'll tell you a story that I experienced. It was 1943, Tafshin Gimel. He says, me, David Eilman, and my chaver, whose name was Hirschel Fogelman, who was living at the time in Worcester, Massachusetts, Rabbi Yehuda Tzvi Fogelman. We were standing at the break in the afternoon. They were both Talmidim in the Toim Chitmimim Lubavitch and the Lubavitch Yeshiva on 770 Eastern Parkway. 3 years after the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe Rats came to America. It was a little yeshiva, 770 Eastern Parkway, Toim Chitmimim. It was break, 2 o'clock, 2:30. We were standing outside, if you know, the building a little bit by the elevator. Later, the Rebbe would stand there and give dollars. And we're standing and having a cigarette. It's 1943. And we were schmoozing what Bochum schmooze about 2 o'clock in the afternoon when you have a little break and you're smoking a cigarette. The door opens up, and who comes out? A Jew who was then known as the Rambash. Rambash is an acronym of Reb Menachem Schneerson, who later became the Lubavitcher Rebbe. At that time, he was known as the Rambash, the son-in-law of his father-in-law, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the Rebbe Rayatz, the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. He comes out. They called Chassan of the Bein Nesiyah, the Eidim, the son-in-law of the Rebbe. So, we greeted him cordially. And he looks at me and at my friend, and he says, in Yiddish, I'll translate, wilt hören a frischen Wort von Rebbe? Do you want to hear a fresh Wort, a fresh insight from the Rebbe, referring to his father-in-law, the Rebbe Rayatz? As we say, fresh out of the oven, and they say Havada, of course. And the Rambash, who would later become the Lubavitcher Rebbe, says, I'll share it with you. He says, into 770 come in all types of Jews. 1943. Once in a while, there come here Jews who used to be religious on the other side of the ocean. They came to America. They threw the tefillin into the Atlantic. The kids went to public schools. There was no infrastructure of education. And they lost their touch. No Shabbos, no Kashrus, no Chinuch Habonim, no Torah, no Yerushalayim. No kashrus anymore. No taras hamishpacha. They come in once in a while for it. You come to a Kaddish, a Yortzeit. You come in. Ich hab a minig. I have a custom. Ich bin sehr warm zu say. I embrace them warmly. I greet them. I welcome them. I connect to them. And I encourage them. Und se da ältere Chassidim. There are older Chabad Lubavitcher Chassidim who tell me, this is a chutzpah. This is a disgrace. You're giving a hechsher to their Chilul Shabbos. The Lubavitcher Rebbe's son-in-law is nice to them. What does that mean? They're wonderful Jews. They could drive on Shabbos. They don't have to eat kosher. They could keep the stores open on Shabbos. You're giving a hechsher. What should I do, I said? Throw them out. Be rude. Be harsh. Don't be nice. Tell them the truth. The Rebbe says to them, bei mir ist euch gekommen anders. I thought differently, but I didn't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Bin ich heint aruf zum Rebbe. So today I went up to the Rebbe, my father-in-law, zum Shver. He said, zum Shver, to my father-in-law. And I told him the question. I said, I'm Mekar of these Jews, older Chassidim, told me I'm wrong, frag ich beim Schwer, frag ich beim Rebbe, and I'm asking the Rebbe, what's the right thing to do? And the Rambash, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, says, this is what the Rebbe told me. And he said it in Yiddish, and Reb David Edelman told it over to me, hearing it directly from the Rebbe in 43, Tovshin Gil. He said, my father-in-law told me, when parents have a child, the Rebbeinu Shalom made that their love to this child is absolute and infinite. You would think there's no more room in the heart for love. But when they have a second child, there is room for love again, which is infinite. You would think at this point, it's filled to the top. They have another child, and the heart expands yet infinitely again with overflowing love to the child. And with each child, the heart opens up and becomes a conduit for more and more infinite, endless love. Und danach wird geboren a Kind. And then sometimes a child is born. And the child may be suffering an illness. The child may be experiencing disability. The child may have a physical or neurological, physiological condition with serious limits. And the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, looks up at his son-in-law. You ever saw pictures of the Friedrich Rebbe, the Rayatz, Malach Elakim. He looks up at his son-in-law, and Rebbe David says, I'm going to say this in the words in Yiddish. He says, für dem Kind haben sie an eigenartige Liebschaft. For this child, they have something special of a love. Because the pain, because the difficulties of this child, there's so much empathy. There's so much compassion. They don't love this child less. You can even love a child more, this is the child they love even more. The first children they love infinitely, emes. But this child they love even more infinitely. He says, the Rebbe looked at me and he said, Der Eibishter hat lieb jede Id wie an eigenem Kind. Hashem loves every Jew infinitely like you love your child. Aber wenn sie da Yid, was sie fällt bei ihm in Tfilin. There's a Jew who's missing in Tfilin. Fällt doch etwas in the hand. There's an infection, there's a spiritual challenge in his arm. A Yid was get nicht kein Zdaka, fällt in the hand. He said a Jew doesn't learn Torah, a Jew doesn't daven, a Jew doesn't have other mitzvahs. He went through different limbs of the body. There's a challenge. The soul is hurting because a Jew is one with Hashem. The soul is hurting in a deep place. There's a spiritual or emotional wound and trauma that this child, this Jew is experiencing. He says, "For a Zayid hat der Eibishter an eigenartige Liebschaft." For such a Jew, he has a unique love. And the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, looks up at his son-in-law, the future Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he says, "Du für sich wie der Eibishter." You behave like Hashem. Love every Jew. Love every Jew. With every fiber of your being. But when you see a Jew struggling, you love him or her even more. They're driving back from Lakewood from the Chasana. She's feeling guilty that they spent so much money on this wedding completely not reflecting their standards, to put it mildly. And as she puts on this sheer, this is the story she hears. As I'm standing in her home, she says, "You gave us back our soul, our life. I felt so proud with my decision. I realized this was exactly what I needed to hear on the way home from the wedding. It was that ultimate validation. And you're here today. I thought I should call him, but you probably get 100 calls, 1,000 calls. You don't need another call, but you're here. And the wedding was just recently. I can't not say thank you." I look at her, I said, "I didn't really do anything. I was sound asleep. 2:30 in the morning, nobody wakes me up besides Kesher Nafshi, okay? And the other Shabbaton. I said, but I'm grateful that I was the conduit. Ana Hashem, ki ani avdecha. And then I say, wow, which night was this? Which night was this? So she says, oh, it was February 5th. Remember, it's right before Corona. February 5th. Like, February 5th. Why is that day? I think I had an event that day. I was up. I was up 2:30 in the morning. February 5th. Let me look at the calendar. I look at the calendar. It was just a few weeks before that. It was Yud Shvat. That's the yard site of the Rebbe Rayatz. I say, wow, the chasana was on Yud Shvat. You were coming home as I was farbringing just a few blocks away with the Chevre on Forshay in the tent, 24 Forshay. We had a huge oilam. And you were driving back and you heard me share this story. In fact, I shared the story in the tent. I shared the story in the tent. And before I shared the story, I said to myself, you know how Jews always say, you said it already last time, right? That's like the favorite feedback for a speech, right? You said it already. Thank you, brilliant. You said it already. You said it already. That story, I said it already, right? No? Men, you could say, yeah. Okay, thank you. So I'm thinking, but sometimes I think, should I say, I said the story. It's the story she heard, Yud Shvat, the day of the chasana. And then she looks at me and she starts crying. I say, why are you crying? She says, let me tell you another part of the story that I wouldn't have known to connect without what you just told me. And she says, you know, I grew up as a secular Jew. My father's name was Josh Zwatsky. A typical Jew, America, 1933, he was born. In the Treifene Medina, both his parents died very, very young. He was an orphan. He was raised by his uncle and aunt. So they weren't even raising their own child. And they needed to give him some education. So they sent him to some type of basic Jewish school in Brooklyn. And he got a little bit of a Jewish education. And at the age of 11, somebody took him in to the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz, for a Yechidus, 1948. My father, Josh, at the time, was 1944. My father, Josh, was 11 years old. And the Rebbe Rayatz looked at him, kleine Yingele, and he said, Ich will dir geben a bracha. I want to give you a blessing. This is a difficult country. Aber du wirst haben jüdische Nachas von deinen Kindern, von deiner Eneklach, lichtige jüdische Deures. You're going to produce beautiful generations of proud, inspired Jews. Now, I meet 11-year-olds all the time. I really don't talk about their marriages, their future. It's not the conversation with an 11-year-old, 20-year-old, a 30-year-old. But that's what the Rebbe said. Very soon, like most American Jews of the 1940s, he left Yiddishkeit. He moved to San Diego. San Diego was the quintessential spiritual Jewish desert in the United States of America in the 1940s and 50s. He went into the beauty supply business. He had a successful business. He married a secular Jewish woman, but a Jewish woman. And they had two beautiful little girls. They were given secular names, but they also had two Jewish names, Shendel and Dvoira. Life goes on. It's a secular, classic, West Coast, California, Jewish home. The father who still remembers Abisala, Afin Pripechik, Brenda Fayedro, Und in Stub ist heiß, und der Rebbe mit die kleinen Kinder lach, lernen alle Verbes. And that's where it ended. Zogtje Kinder lach. And one day, the 1970s, a weird rabbi lands in San Diego. A Chabad Shliach lands in San Diego. And he opens a Chabad house. And who does he bump into? Josh Zawatsky. Who are you? Chabad, Lubavitch. I was by the Lubavitch Rebbe in 1944. Come to shul. For Yartzeit, I'll come to shul. Comes for Yartzeit to say Kaddish. He likes the rabbi, likes the kugel, likes the Rebbitzins, gefilte fish, soup, ambiance. He likes it. Comes another Yartzeit, another Yartzeit. Why don't you come Shabbos? We have a great time here. It's great. I'm not into the religious thing. Come to shul if they're into the religious thing. Nobody is into the religious thing. Who comes to shul for religion? You know anybody? Yeah, Shimon is doing shul anonymous. Who comes to shul for religion? He starts coming to shul. He loves the rabbi. It triggers something in him. He comes home. He has teenage girls, California Jewish secular girls. Shendel, come to shul. What do I have with the synagogue? It's a great place. He nudges his daughters to come with him to the Chabad synagogue in San Diego. Finally, just to appease their father, who was a nice guy, they came. They heard a class. It touched them. She tells me, I was going every weekend to disco with my friends. And when I was listening to this, I said, this touches me in a deeper place. And I came back the next week and I said, I think I'm going to have to make a choice what type of life I want to live. A life in the disco or a life with more meaning. And after a few months, I said, I want to go learn more of Yiddishkeit. And she and her sister ended up by Rebbitzin Leah Khan in Netzach, which was then in Muncie. And a few years later, she, the daughter of Josh, married her husband Elchanan, who was a musmach from the Mir, from Ney Yisrael in Toronto, a Rav, a Talmud Chacham, a big Talmud Chacham. And they built a beautiful family. And she said, my father saw this. And he said, the Lubavitch Rebbe knew this in 1944. I think I'm going to start keeping Shabbos. And he came back to Yiddishkeit as an old man. And as he saw both of his daughters build Jewish families with grandchildren in the yeshivas, and his nachas was swelling until his passing just 4 years ago. But she says, but there was that one boy, Shmuley, my son, struggling. And I knew in my heart, we have to be close, we have to be connected. And when I felt guilt about the wedding I made, coming home, it was that same person, the Lubavitcher Rebbe de Rayatz, who shared with me that empowered message that you never, ever detach from a child. You love that child. You're proud of that child. You empathize with that child. You go on the journey with that child. You connect with that child. You feel that child. This is what she tells me that night as I was trying to get a passport to go to Rostov, where the Rebbe Rayatz became Rebbe after his father's passing in 1920. This is the story the passport lady shared with me today, and I am privileged that Peril Schneider is right here in the crowd with us. The proud mother of Shmuley and his Kala, Rachel, who, and as I spoke to her Friday night, I met her. And she said, "You remember me?" I'm like, give me the hint. I'm a man, give me the hint. She's like, "Passport lady." I said, "Lakewood, wedding, YouTube." It's like, yeah. I said, it's 2 years later. She says, 2 years later, they come to us almost every Shabbos. And I want you to know something, she said. A few weeks ago, Shabbos ended. And I saw that both my son and my daughter-in-law ran to get their phones. And I looked at my husband and I said, they're keeping Shabbos. And you helped me. Because when I see Mitzvah Shabbos, you know how the Chevra run to get their phones? And I'm like, I'm giving such good Shalashudas Torah. But really, Shendel, I should really say, they're keeping Shabbos. I think that's how Hashem looks at it. Habeit mishamayim ure'eh. 80 years after Hitler, they're keeping Shabbos. They're keeping Shabbos. They didn't have to. Nobody forced them. They're keeping Shabbos. And as I met Shendel here this Shabbos, she says, one missing piece I never told you. I said, what? She said, why at 2 a.m. did I decide you're my therapist? I'm like, beats me. I don't know what Kool-Aid you have been drinking. I don't know what YY flicks you have been watching. I don't know. I don't mix into people's lives. She says, I'll tell you why. 6 years ago, my father, Josh, came for a visit from San Diego to Muncie. He says, she says, I'm a busy mother, a busy lady, raising a family, making passports for Jews who have no patience and have to fly. They already missed their flight. It's a busy life. By day, I'm busy. By night, I'm busy. Fit in a Yiddish shtub, we don't have to explain it, at least not to the Ezra's Noshim. And even not to the Ezra's Anash. I'm not I don't go places. I'm not the Shia person. My father was in Muncie. Josh was in Muncie 6 years ago. And he comes home one day and he said, did I hear a rabbi in Muncie? You have to go here, Rabbi YY. So she tells me, Zet wie der Eberste führt der Welt. Trust me, this has nothing to do with me. I slept through this whole story. I'm just here to share it. Ono Hashem, ki ani avdecha. Every soul has a journey. Every soul is accounted for. Every soul is infinitely priceless. Every soul is a piece of Ein Sof. And every soul is running just to come closer. But in this journey, do what Rashi says in Nitzavim. Hashem promises. When the Navi says, Va'atem teluktu le'echad echad b'nei Yisrael. Every Jew will be gathered. V'shav Hashem alekecha shvus chazak Rashi. It's like Hashem oiches. Hashem will hold the hand of every single Jew. Echad, echad. He won't say, Klal Yisrael, get together. Va'atem teluktu le'echad, echad. Rashi says this. He's kilu holding the hand of every individual, bringing him or her to Geula. Why? Can't Hashem get up as a microphone? Send out a WhatsApp? Yeah? Yeah? Google knows how to get around. The original G doesn't know how to get around. Send out a WhatsApp message, yeah? Those who don't have WhatsApp, yeah? Those are not text. Those who have a flip-flop, those on an MSS message. Those who have nothing, and they'll hear it, right? He'll figure out a way. Rashi says no. He holds everybody by the hand. Come. Because in the time of Geula, there's one model. And the model is, don't get up on a roof and scream at me. Come here, you loser. Take each and every one of them by their hands. Feel the warmth of the hand. Hold the hand. And with an embrace and with a hug, walk with them. Don't walk in front of me. I may not follow. Don't walk behind me. I may not lead. I say to all of you, but let's walk together so that we can have the courage to hold on to everyone's hand. And don't get afraid if that hand feels cold, if the hand feels frozen. Don't even get afraid if the hand feels lifeless and numb. And don't even get afraid if she pulls away her hand from you, or he pulls away his hand from you with words that are painful. Don't get afraid. I'm there. Shem says, I'm there. I'm there. This is your moment to shine. Don't run. This is your moment to embrace the person, to smile, and to say, I'm with you. I'm with you even when you can't feel it, because you can't feel yourself. But I will not stop believing in you, so that you will never stop believing in yourself. And as I hold that hand and you hold that hand, we experience the va'atem teluktu la'echad echad b'nei Yisrael. So I bless me and all of us that we should be able to cultivate those microscopic spiritual eyes, to be able to zoom in and zoom out. Habeit mishamayim. Look at every one of them, mishamayim, from the heavenly perspective. Ure'eh. And then you will see the light of Ein Sof that each of us was zoiche to have in our home, to enrich our lives, to hold their hands as a preparation for that great moment very soon, as the Ribbono Shel Olam will be able to join his hands to your hands and hold each of us and each of those children. Va'atem teluktu le'echad echad b'nei Yisrael b'mheira b'yameinu. Amen. Thank you.